What you are about to see is a dramatized retelling based on the second book of Samuel. It touches on real pain, and it is offered for reflection, not as a replacement for Scripture. Open the text. Read it for yourself. Before the rebellion, before the war, the betrayal, the cry that still echoes, there was a girl. Her name was Tamar, a daughter of King David, gentle, beloved, untouched by the politics of the palace. And in one afternoon, behind one closed door, her own half-brother took everything from her. We will not show you what happened in that room. It is enough to know that she went in, a princess in a beautiful robe, and came out with that robe torn, ashes on her head, weeping in the street. And her father, the king, the man who had killed giants, who had united a nation, heard what had been done to his daughter, and he did nothing. That silence is where this whole tragedy begins. The Bible tells us that when King David heard all of this, he was furious. And then it tells us something devastating. It tells us what he did about it. Nothing. No justice for Tamar. No punishment for Amnon. No word, no reckoning, no protection. Just a furious father who could not bring himself to act against the son he favored. Maybe David saw too much of his own sin in Amnon to judge him. Maybe the great king was simply a weak father. The text does not explain it. It just lets the silence sit there, all heavy and unbearable. And in that silence, a few rooms away, Absalom was watching his father do nothing, and he was learning to hate. Absalom waited 2 years. 2 years of smiling at the man who had ruined his sister. 2 years of watching his father do nothing. And then he made his move. He threw a feast, a sheep shearing, the great celebration of the year, and he invited all the king's sons,
Father,
including
come to the
Amnon.
feast. It would honor me greatly.
He even asked his father
No,
to
my
come,
son, you go ahead.
knowing
Your
the king
brothers
would
will
decline
represent me.
and send his sons in his place. It was patient, it was clever. It was exactly the kind of cold, careful planning his father had been unwilling to do, to bring justice the right way. And when the wine was flowing, and Amnon's heart was merry, Absalom gave the signal. Absalom ran. He fled to Geshur, a foreign kingdom, to the house of his grandfather, the king there. And for 3 years he stayed away. 3 years in exile, a prince with no country, a son with no father. And back in Jerusalem, the Bible says something that should stop you cold. It says David mourned for his son every single day. The same father who would not act for Tamar, who would not punish Amnon, now wept daily for the son he had driven away. He longed for Absalom, and still, he did not send for him. Always the feeling, never the act. It was Joab who finally acted. David's hard, practical general saw that the king's heart was breaking for Absalom, and that the king would still do nothing about it. So Joab found a wise woman from Tekoa and sent her to the king with a story.
Speak.
She came pretending to be a grieving widow with a tale of 2 sons, one who had killed the other, and a family demanding the survivor's death. Should she lose her last son too, she asked?
Shall be protected.
And David,
No harm will come
moved,
to him
said
while
no.
I am king.
He would protect the boy. And then she turned his own words
Why will
on
the
him.
king not do for his
Why,
own
she
banished
said,
son what he has just
will
sworn
you not
for
do
a
for your own
stranger's?
son what you have just promised me? David heard it, and he knew exactly who had sent her. So Absalom came home. But here's the wound inside the wound. David let him return to Jerusalem, but commanded that Absalom must not see his face. Live in the city, the king said, But do not come into my presence. Imagine it. Home at last, in the same city as your father in Cole, and forbidden to look him in the eye. For 2 more years, Absalom lived a few streets from the throne, and his father would not see him. The half measure, the reconciliation that refuses to reconcile. Until Absalom, desperate to force the issue,
Why would you
did
do
something
this?
drastic. He set Joab's field on fire, and so, at last, after 5 years, 3 in exile, 2 more barred from the throne, Absalom was brought before his father. He bowed his face to the ground, and the king kissed him. It should have been the moment everything healed. But read it carefully. There is no conversation, no apology, no reckoning with what happened to Tamar, no father asking his son how his heart had grown so cold. Just a kiss, a formality, a door opened an inch, and never all the way. Absalom came looking for a father, and he got a ceremony. You need to understand what Absalom was. The Bible goes out of its way to tell us that in all Israel, there was no man so praised for his beauty. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, the text says, there was no flaw in him. And his hair, his thick, magnificent hair, was so heavy that when he cut it once a year, it weighed 5 pounds. The crowds adored him. They reached out just to touch him. He was everything a king should look like. Remember the hair, because the very thing that made him glorious is the thing that is going to kill him. Now watch the campaign. Every morning, Absalom rose early and stood beside the road to the city gate, where people came seeking the king's justice,
My lord,
and he would stop each one.
make everything that
He would
nothing
take them by the hand.
You will have justice.
He would say,
I will see
your
to it
case is good and
personally.
right, but there is no one from the
Cause is
king to
just,
hear you.
but no one from the
If only I were judge in the land. He would sigh. Everyone would get the justice they deserve. And when they bowed to him, he would not let them. He would pull them up and kiss them, like equals, like family. The Bible has a perfect phrase for what he did. He stole the hearts of the people of Israel. Quietly, patiently, for 4 years. The same patience. He once used to kill a brother. Then he made his move.
Let me go to Hebron.
Absalom
and
asked his
fulfill a
father
vow
for
I made
permission
to the Lord.
to go to Hebron,
Go
to
in
worship,
peace.
he said. And David, still blind to his son, said, go in peace. But Hebron was where David himself had first been crowned. Absalom chose it on purpose. And there, with the hearts of Israel already his, he sent secret messengers through every tribe. As soon as you hear the trumpet, they said, declare it. Absalom is king in Hebron. The trumpet sounded. The conspiracy was strong, and the son declared himself king in his father's place. A son has just declared himself king in his father's place. And what the old king does next will break your heart. If this story has hold of you, tap like and subscribe, and stay with us to the end. The news
hearts
reached
of
David
Israel
like a
are
blow.
with your son.
The hearts of Israel have gone after Absalom. And the giant killer, the man who never ran from Goliath, made a stunning choice. He ran, not out of cowardice, but to spare Jerusalem from becoming a battlefield. He left the city on foot, weeping as he climbed the Mount of Olives, his head covered, walking barefoot, the whole country weeping with him. The king was fleeing the sun. He had failed to raise, failed to discipline, failed to truly see. Every step up that hill was a step into the harvest of his own silence. In Jerusalem, Absalom sat on his father's throne, And everything now turned on a single decision. His wisest advisor, Ahithophel,
Strike tonight.
gave him cold,
Chase the
perfect
weary
counsel.
End
Strike
it
tonight,
fast.
while David is weary and weak. Chase him down before he can gather an army.
Long live the king!
And end this with one swift
Long
blow.
live the king!
It would have worked. But David still had one friend. In Absalom's court,
All
a man named Hushai,
is
secretly loyal to the true king. And Hushai stood up and gave the opposite advice. Wait, gather all Israel first. Overwhelm him with numbers. It was a trap, a delay to save David's life. And Absalom, proud, wanting a grand and glorious victory, chose the wrong one. David's delay had bought him an army. Across the Jordan, loyal men gathered to him, hardened veterans who loved their king. And as they prepared for battle against Absalom's forces, David gave one command: not win, not crush them, not bring me the head of the usurper.
With the young man
He stood before his commanders, Joab, Abishai, Ittai, and in front of all the troops he said, "Deal gently, for my sake, with the young man Absalom." The young man, not the traitor, not the rebel. The young man,
Kingdom outweighs
even
the
now,
king's heart.
he was still his boy. The two armies met in the forest of Ephraim, and the battle went against Absalom. David's hardened veterans tore through his army of stolen hearts. 20,000 men fell that day. But here is the strange and haunting detail. The Bible records. The forest itself devoured more people that day than the sword. The ravines, the thickets, the great tangled oaks, the land that Absalom had come to conquer, rose up and swallowed his army whole. And then it happened. Absalom, fleeing on his mule, rode beneath the thick branches of a great oak, and his head, his beautiful head, that glorious, magnificent hair, caught fast in the branches. The mule ran on without him, and there he hung, suspended between heaven and earth. The very thing that had made the crowds adore him, the glory he was so proud of, became the noose that held him helpless in the air. His pride, quite literally, was his undoing. A soldier had found Absalom first and refused to touch him because the king had said, "Deal gently." But when Joab heard that Absalom was hanging
found
there
him.
alive,
And
he
let
was
him
furious.
live.
"You found him," Joab said, "and you did not strike him down?" The soldier
I heard the
answered,
king.
"I heard the
I will
king
not raise a
command you
hand
all
against Absalom for any
to protect
reward.
the young man. I would not raise my hand against him for anything." But Joab had no such hesitation. He took 3 spears in his hand, and he went to the oak, where the king's son still hung helpless. And he did what David had begged him not to do. They took Absalom's body and threw it into a great pit in the forest, and piled a huge heap of stones over it. The prince who had wanted a monument, who had built a pillar to keep his own name alive, was buried under a mound of rocks in the middle of a wood. And now
Let me
someone
run and
had to
take the
tell
news to
the
king.
king.
I will bring him good tidings.
A young runner begged to carry the news. Joab tried to stop him. He knew this was not good news to bring. But the runner went anyway, racing across the plain toward Mahanaim, toward a father sitting between the gates,
A
waiting,
man comes running!
desperate for word of his boy. The runner reached the gate.
Victory! God has delivered
"Victory,
the rebels
O
into
king,"
our hands.
he gasped.
Our hands!
"God has delivered up the man who rebelled against you." And David,
Is the
the
young
king who
man
had just won back his
Absalom
kingdom,
safe?
asked only one question. Not, "Is the throne secure?" Not, "How many of the enemy fell?" Not, "Is the rebellion over?"
There was a
He asked.
commotion.
"Is the young man Absalom safe?" And the runner,
I don't know.
who had outrun the truth, suddenly had no words. Then a second messenger came, and he could not hide
May
it.
the enemies of my king be as that young man.
May the
is.
enemies of my king, he said, be as that young man is. And the king went up to the chamber over the gate, away from the eyes of his army, and he wept. And as he went, he said the words that have echoed for 3,000 years. O my son Absalom, my son, Absalom. That's us. If only I had died instead of you. O Absalom,
Oh, my son.
son.
Absalom.
my son. Listen to what is underneath that cry. If only I had died instead of you. He is not just grieving. He is confessing.
Absalom.
He knows. He knows that the silence began with him, that the wound he refused to heal grew into this.
God, I had died.
And now,
instead
too
of
late,
you.
he would trade his own life for the son he never knew how to reach. David's grief was so total that it began to poison his victory. His soldiers, the men who had just risked everything to save him, crept back into the city like men ashamed because the king was mourning the man they had died to defeat. And hard, ruthless Joab
You shamed the
went
men
up to the
who
king
saved you.
and said something brutal.
Rise, go
And
out
true.
to them.
You're shaming the men who saved your life. Get up, go out, speak to them. And David, because he was still the king, wiped his face and went out to his people. The grief did not end. He simply had to carry it and rule at the same time. So what do we do with Absalom? It would be easy to call him a villain, a traitor, a murderer, a man who tried to kill his own father. And all of that is true. But remember where he began. He began as a brother, holding a sister the world had broken, waiting for a father to do what was right, and watching that father do nothing. Absalom is what happens when a wound is never healed, when pain is met with silence,
Justice,
when the people who should protect us
vengeance,
look away.
ambition,
The rage that should have been justice
rebellion.
curdled into vengeance. The vengeance hardened into ambition. The ambition became a rebellion that devoured him and his father. Who could win any battle, except the one inside his own house,
Oh, my son.
was left crying the
Absalom.
saddest words in the Bible. Would God I had died instead of you. The tragedy of Absalom is not that he was evil. It is that he was a wound that someone should have tended and no one did. A wounded son, a silent father, a kingdom torn in two by a pain that no one would face. The story of Absalom is a warning about what grows in the soil of silence. There are more stories like this, more truth beneath the surface than you were ever shown. Walk with us a little longer. Subscribe to the Christian Realm, because the next story is already waiting